My name is Nick Ford. I'm the country director for PCI in Tanzania. So I joined PCI in May of 2018. So I've been in Tanzania coming up to 2 years. I've worked for international NGOs since 1996, different NGOs in different places. So I've worked in Tanzania, Malawi, Eritrea, Nigeria, Macedonia, Kosovo, Uganda, and Rwanda.
And you were Peace Corps Tanzania.
And I started off as a Peace Corps volunteer in Tanzania. So I grew up on a farm in Southwest Ohio, farm boy with boots and cowboy hat and pickup trucks. And my father was an accountant, so we always worked off the farm. After graduating university, I went and became an investment banker for 2 years. That wasn't very interesting for me at the time, so I went in the Peace Corps. Never been out of the country before. Went to Tanzania. Completely, obviously, changed the trajectory of my life significantly. And I've had an amazing opportunity to live and work in different places. And Tanzania is a very nice place to work in. So it's nice to meet all you, everybody.
Do you have a family?
Oh,
I'm not, by the way, I'm not interviewing, it's not a job interview, so don't chase me around. I was just interested from the standpoint of you've served so many different places. So
I met my wife in West Africa, in the Gambia, when she was a Peace Corps volunteer. So it took a few years for us to get on the same continent. And then we lived as a family, we've lived in Nigeria, Eritrea, Malawi, United States, Ecuador, and now Tanzania.
Wow. You've done everything from running a refugee camp, I believe, to development programs in all of those countries, to management training and development, and
yeah,
just a very rich
And you have
career
children?
and background.
yeah.
How many?
2 children.
I'm interested how you're doing their education. Are they going to local schools in each of these countries or the American school?
In Malawi, they went to the international school.
Okay,
They started there, and then in Chapel Hill, they went to a local public school
sure.
for 4 years. In Ecuador, we moved to a small town up in northern Ecuador, and they went to a local school.
Yeah.
It was tough. Spanish, only Spanish all the time.
how old are they?
From my own experience, I mean, I was telling you, I grew up in, so I was always thrown into local schools. It's just been fantastic, as a life learning, and being able to speak multiple languages, really makes you stand out as an American, actually.
It differentiates.
Yeah, it does. Yeah,
Yeah.
it does.
Our children had, a variety of education environments
Right. That's good.
And in Tanzania now?
in the international school.
International school.
So my wife's a teacher at the international school. She teaches middle school and high school math.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And your kids speak multiple languages?
English and Spanish.
Okay.
And they're going to forget that Spanish if they were.
Smattering of Swahili. It's coming slowly. Spanish, yeah. It's not as good. We lived in Ecuador for 2 years, and they went with the foundations and left with fluency. So our daughter just went back to Spain
That's good.
October of last year.
How old is she?
16.
Okay.
And yeah, she said she speaks very well, but said it was
She
rusty.
may be old enough. Our family was 5 kids and they spanned, 12 years. So as we moved around, you could actually do a scientific experiment. And it's pretty clear that if you're 12, 13, 14, when you're in a foreign, you will never forget it. But if you're 8, it disappears. It's really amazing.
We also have
Okay, are we ready to go?
We have Joe Abate on the line. I don't know.
Hi, Joe. Hi, Joe.
Hey, guys.
The other question?
Joe's on
Maybe
our-
Joe and
Time
Karen,
to start.
you could both introduce yourselves. Joe, you want to go first?
You did. Or Karen.
Yeah, this is Joe Abate. on the board and chair of the finance committee. And then apologies, I do have to drop off at 1, but I do plan on listening to the recording. I'm glad it's being recorded. Thank you.
Joe. And Karen.
Okay. Hi, everybody. It's Karen. It's great to join you.
And Patterson.
Karen's on the board as well.
Yeah.
And I thought maybe John Potter, but I don't see. Oh, I see. You can tell who's on there. Okay.
Peter's on.
Peter's on. Why don't I see? I know.
Okay, take it
So
away.
good morning.
Yeah.
We're hoping
Good
still
day, everybody.
I mean, Nick can speak as long as he wants, but we'd love to make sure that we have enough time for discussion. That seems to be where a lot of the rich education and sharing and discovery comes from. So hopefully we'll be able to do that.
Yeah, thank you again for this opportunity to share a little bit about what PCI is doing in Tanzania. It's a lot. There's a huge program out there. And it's the work of everybody in this office, the DC office, and the 100+ staff in Tanzania that we have. So I just have the privilege of presenting it, but it's the work of dozens and dozens of people. So I'll start by sharing a little bit about the team. Next slide. So we have over 100 people on payroll now, except for me. It's all Tanzanian staff. And we have 2 regional technical advisors in Tanzania, but they work all over Africa. So the vast majority of our team is Tanzanians. We have a small office in Dar es Salaam here, which is back office, finance, admin, HR, myself. Arusha is a smart program, AfriScout. And the majority of our work and our staff and our programming is up here in Mara region, the western part of Tanzania, which is where 3 of our 4 programs are located.
Nick, can you show where Dodoma is on this map? And
Dodoma is the capital city, administrative city. It's like Islamabad in Pakistan, it's like Brasilia in Brazil, Abuja in Nigeria. It's a recently created city, and the government's just moving to Dodoma the last couple of years. So we have 4 different programs, and I'll go through these a little bit. 4 of them are the effects program, early childhood development. School feeding is our FIFI and LRP, school feeding programs. Women's empowerment is the women's group, savings and lending. And then AfriScout is the satellite maps for pastoralists. So the effects program wants to answer 2 main questions. Is there a beneficial role in fathers being involved in children's development in rural Tanzania? And the other one is, what's the best way to stimulate early childhood development? So this program is funded by 2 donors, Eleanor Croft Foundation and the Hilton Foundation. So it's foundation funding. And it's a research program over 2 years. So it has 4 different groups of people, parents involved in nurturing their children, and 4 different curricula. So one curricula is only for mothers only with nutrition. Another curricula is mothers and fathers only with nutrition. So that's one arm. The other arm is nutrition plus playing, plus skill development, plus different nurturing care. So the model was showing 4 different approaches to childhood development and being evaluated constantly by Harvard University and Purdue University. So we hope to get the findings from this program later this year that can be used in the national policy of the government of Tanzania.
Can you go backwards on this a little bit? My question is, not you, Jenny. Yeah, thank you. How did this idea come about? From the beginning, who thought of this, that we should ask this question, number 1, about fathers? And then how did you go about getting the funding on one program? And then how did you decide to do funding on a separate program? And then finally, January 2021, that expires, and is there a plan that we would chase or to go after and extend the program? I hope it was all right to ask a question. Gary.
Fantastic question.
I would have never remembered.
And I have the luxury of implementing this program, but not having the experience in how it was
But I could fill
developed. I was going to,
That you,
I was going to
Yeah.
ask Janine
So-
to try to help
Okay.
us
So
understand.
we actually met with the grandson of Eleanor J. Crook, who was at a core group meeting. And a number of us went out to dinner to a Greek food restaurant, and we started talking about different things. And he started to get to know PCI a little bit more. He actually shared with us the request for application for what was a nutrition-oriented program for Tanzania.
and they're located where? The
They're
coast.
located in, I think she's in New York.
Okay.
And so, anyway, so we responded to that request for application. There's another group, Helen Keller International also has a nutrition program in Tanzania funded through Eleanor J. Crook. So when we first started at the same time, so Bettina, if you remember, Bettina was actually interacting with Hilton Foundation. We went up to Orange County to meet with them. We started talking about this program. They got really interested in adding or piggybacking on top of it. And so that's how it basically, that's how it came up. Mhm.
Is, it's early childhood development right now is so important because it's that 2 to 5 year range. So not only does it impact, on a nutritionally impact stunting, but it also provides a pathway to education, primary school education. So in Tanzania, fathers being involved in their children's rearing children, raising children, especially in the Mara region, is culturally just not really done. And so this research project is really interesting because it really goes against what is the cultural norm in that region to show, does the father's involvement have an impact in whether it's nutrition outcomes or education outcomes versus mothers. And in addition to that, does how you stimulate children in addition to the nutrition education have an impact on? So looking at multiple things, but very, very relevant to the Tanzania context.
And how do we get the two universities involved?
So that came about because Mary Pat Kiefer, who was our Senior Director of Health at the time, was connected to both universities, had linkages, and we do not see ourselves as a high-powered research outfit. I mean, we are doing the work and we're very much involved in the strategizing and the conceptualization, but the actual research piece we wanted to partner with universities. Okay. So it was a personal connections, but we need university connections.
So we got to how we got to the program. Fantastic. What happens when we get to the end?
Before we get
go ahead.
Hear about it first.
I ask a little more about this. So the study, these studies were started almost at the same time. So I take it that they were really in effect designed at the same time. So the methodology and approach on both of these arms or two cohorts are exactly the same. Mm-hmm. And any other factors of control, whether it's location or et cetera, between these two different ones are going to be
completely integrated.
Completely integrated. And so you got a couple of clinical trial experts in that table, and I had the same sort of questions, was there a ramp up in terms of recruitment? Did you get people on board in all these groups pretty quickly so that, or is it?
It's a very good question. I mean, there's a history in Tanzania of NGOs doing these projects with groups. So forming groups is easier. Mm-hmm. You get the government involved, you get the community involved. Forming the groups isn't the hard part. It's the maintenance of the group. It's the continuation of the group. I think as Jenny said, one of the interesting aspects of this program is where we're working. Because traditionally men are not at all involved, I can't say not at all, but not much involved in the early nurturing of children. It's just not part of the man's role in the household. And there's not a lot of what we would consider significant nurturing by mothers either. It's just a completely different culture than what we've been raised in. And what we're trying to show here is there a different way to produce better outcomes for the people of Tanzania? And what the beauty is we have proper research universities that will be able to show, is it true or not? And it's not just what we're doing, the nutrition and the nurturing care, but how. how can we go about doing this? And, this is a very powerful program because it can influence national policy. And if the data shows, we don't know what to do until the data comes. So we need to design our future strategy based on what the data shows us, based on what the universities.
Both of these foundations have significant resources.
So if the data, to your point you just made, if the data shows that nurturing by the father makes a difference, that creates a pathway one way into another program perhaps, or what?
I can
Go ahead.
add that too. Once the data comes out, I think one immediate output would be the publication, some kind of a publication. How that publication gets disseminated and used, whether it's to share with the peer organizations or with the donors or with government to influence policy. There's a whole advocacy and dissemination aspect that can happen depending on what the results are. And then in addition, following that, there's a question of, well, then does it get replicated in another place? Do you then see if you get similar results in another place? And then before you scale into something bigger. So I think within these foundations, you have people who are very interested in different aspects of this. Some are interested in the implementation side and others are interested in the advocacy side. So it's really.
So for example, with Eleanor J. Cook, if they, let's say your example, we that father's engagement, blah, 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 they might come to us, the government might come to us and say, we need help with capacity development, with materials, with the, taking that curriculum, updating it and bringing it to scale. So there are many, many things that could happen programmatically. But the other thing that could happen is any of these foundations could say, we really like the kind of research that you do, where you combine your sort of emphasis on social determinants of health, community, and sort of cultural issues and how it affects things like health, biological issues like health and nutrition, and the partnership with universities. And we'd like you to do additional research in another topic or a related topic.
In a different country.
Could be whatever.
Yeah, so I'm sorry, my last point, what I really liked from that standpoint is that it can be a sustainable program, but in, working within the community and leading the education of fathers of families. So it's a program that won't end necessarily at, here's the research, pass it out. We might be doing something later.
But
All right.
this must be a very difficult and universal problem that you are trying to change a culture, and you can perhaps show these people that there is a better way to do things. That doesn't mean that they're going to buy into it. So, and I'm sure that's true in just about the whole panoply of things that we can think we can show them how we think they should do better. But how do you convince them that they need to change? People are very conservative in general, and so it takes a lot for them to make a major change, especially when it has to do with sex roles.
Yeah, so social norm shifting is a huge issue. We could talk for days about social norm shifting. Yeah. I think that one of the pieces that this is addressing is at least getting the evidence and working through the platform of the government policy, protocols, procedures, because through that there will be a lot of pressure points. It's not the only thing, but it's one thing.
Yeah.
One interesting thing here is that there are other organizations doing work with early childhood development, but PCI in Tanzania is the only one who's engaging fathers, right? Not only the only one engaging fathers, but the research aspect will provide very robust evidence that can then inform policy. So it's not so much just about a program being sustained, but if you influence policy, government policy around early childhood development, that does have a potential even to impact culture, right? So it's the fact that this is packaged in a very robust research project. I think that the quality of the evidence that comes out of here is going to be potentially very powerful.
So is there at least 5 or 6 other programs that we could do better?
Okay, I want to ask you more questions.
One thing I think maybe just make a comment. I think it's something worthy of Jay for the program to maybe come back to with respect to the question of strategy here. So. What is really our kind of PCI position around research programs? Are we seeking to leverage it for expanding other research programs? Are we using it to try to obtain
other forms of support for implementation, for example? And I'm not, I mean, that's maybe beyond what we need to talk about right now, but maybe something we can get back to. So that's a perfect area. Interesting question.
Ms. Cavell, sorry, Nick, Ms. Cavell, Nick Ford, let me introduce.
Sorry, a few minutes late.
This is on our program committee. He's been on the PCI board for how many months? How many years have you been on the board?
Forever, but I'll be honest soon. But I did make a visit to Tanzania when we had one staff person who didn't have any fancy titles.
Darian.
Darian.
Yes. Yes, when we started with Starbucks and building and rehab hotel water wells. We went. Bahawasa project.
They made me shovel cement to show the ladies there that they could do it too.
We're building water well. Okay.
You guys, Carrie.
Hi, Carrie.
Hi. I think this is a fantastic conversation, but I want to make sure Nick gets through his presentation.
Yeah, we already know.
Yeah, we know.
And also, I'm sorry to interrupt. Also, something happened in the last 3 minutes with your audio there. You're coming through very staticky on the remote end. Can you maybe just mute and unmute or something?
Okay, we'll mute. Let me know if this is better.
It's better, but now we can't hear you.
Yeah, now unmute.
How's that?
Yeah, no, that didn't help. I'm not sure what happened. It was just.
Don't do the chips, Ruth.
So I'll come back to the question about strategy in the course of my presentation, because there's several examples in Tanzania that I think will be very helpful to talk about. How do we move from implementation to informing policy? We're doing that in 3 different areas.
You guys, this is Carrie. I'm so sorry to disturb you, but I think you're going to have to go out of Zoom and come back in because there are a bunch of people who are online and we're not able to hear anything.
Okay.
Maybe just try the audio portion. Perhaps just try and dial back in through the audio, but keep your computer side connected, if you can.
I just hate to make it, there are people who are dialed in who really want to hear.
And if the recording is capturing that static, it's not going to be helpful to anyone.
Okay. We're going to look for Rachel, who's better with the technology.
Thank you. I also texted Melissa to see if she can come in.
She's at lunch. Oh, it's IT stuff. I could do that. Get over there. Here's
Somebody's younger.
We're not hearing it, but it's very good.
It might not be moving on their end.
But it's everybody on that out there in sharing status. Like the crinkling of the food. Can we?
Yeah, we're trying to be really quiet.
Is IT there?
Yeah, just walked in the door.
Oh, great. Thank you.
Jenny, can you explain? Can you hear us now?
Yes, so what's happening is on our end, on the all remote participants and probably within the recording, about 5 minutes ago, your audio just went completely static. So when you talk on your end, we cannot understand because there's just this static line going through it.
We probably need to hang up and reconnect on this end then.
Yeah, and just to validate that, I can hear Carrie perfectly. I can hear Jenny perfectly. Your guys' is very staticky.
Okay, we're going to drop off and rejoin. Okay.
Well, the good news, it was just me asking questions.
Okay, started.
Cloud or?
I'm recording it from
she's
it
recording.
looks like it's recording, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Let me just,
Thank you.
as sort of the organizer here, point out that it's already almost 1 o'clock. So what I suggest is we let Nick make his presentation and we hold questions to the end.
Super. Let's go to the AfriScout. So AfriScout is our second program in Tanzania. It's up in the northern part of the country close to Arusha. If you've seen Mount Kilimanjaro, the Serengeti, it's up towards that area. And this program provides satellite imagery maps to pastoralists, to the Maasai communities. And it's the second phase of a program. We started it in June of this year. And the idea is to allow the pastoralists, the Maasai people, to make better informed decisions about where they migrate their herds. These are people who are completely dependent on cows. So that's their livelihood, that's their wealth. So what PCI has done is to bring satellite imagery maps that are updated every 10 days into a smartphone application that the pastoralist can access to decide where the green grass is, where the water is, where the lions are, where the diseases are. It allows the pastoralist to use real data in combination with their age-old knowledge of where the grass is. And it's fascinating sitting in these bomas, these Maasai bomas with the old chief who knows exactly where the grass is from his grandfather's grandfather, and then his young son that has the app that says, no, Dad, the grass is actually here. And it's fascinating the way that they're using the technology. It increases herd mortality, increases herd production, milk production. It increases their livelihoods. So this is a very exciting program, BCI, up in the northern part of Tanzania. So we're mapping up to 4 districts this time. So the area that we're mapping continues to increase, more users, more government involvement in the app. The Maasai people in northern Tanzania are under threat. Their way of life is under threat these days. Conservation efforts have taken their traditional grazing lands away. Modernity has reduced their ability to continue with their traditional life. They're forced to change. And this app and PCI is helping them to adjust to these changes. It's a life changer for many of these families. It really improves the way that they nurture and they support their herds. Our third program is Chakula Chetu, which is our food in Swahili. So this is a school feeding program in 16 schools. And our big school feeding program is to import the food. Chakula Chetu is to buy the food locally and provide the food for the schools. So this is a pilot program with USDA. So keep in mind, most of these schools don't have water. Most of them don't have electricity. And our program is providing the food. So it's a resource constrained environment. The school meals makes an incredible difference in the children's days. Most of the children are not eating breakfast every day. Families are not eating breakfast. So our program is providing school meals, school lunches, and it changes kids' lives, changes their ability to study. It significantly improves attendance because there'll be food at the school. It's a big difference in children's lives and children's ability to learn. So what do? We're reducing food insecurity in the Mara region because we're helping schools grow food. We're helping communities grow food. We're also providing food meals for communities. And we're working with farmer groups to produce more harvest, cheaper harvest, and diversification of crops being planted. So a pilot program that is well respected by the government of Tanzania and applauded by our donor, the United States Department of Agriculture. So we have 4 different programming areas for Chakula Chetu. There's the food sources. So this is what PCI is purchasing, the program. And then the rest either comes from the school farm, the school garden, or community contributions from parents and other groups. PCI provides a slew of technical support to the schools and to the farmer groups as far as seed selection, improved agricultural practices, post-harvest handling and losses, and village savings and loan strategies. We've also in this program, which is different from our program, different from our other programs, is we've enlisted the partnership of the private sector. So financial institutions, seed companies, and grain buyers have all entered into partnerships with the groups that PCI supports. And finally, government engagement is incredibly important in Tanzania now. So we work at all levels of the government, starting at the school and village level, and then the ward level, which is a small, maybe 4 schools, 5 schools in a ward. A district would be like a county, and then the regional level, and then the national ministry level. And as an NGO in Tanzania, we have to work at all those levels all the time. So this is a 2-year program. So we're working ourselves out of a job and with different strategies so the program can be sustained after PCI's involvement. So the community garden, the school gardens, the school farms, the work with the nutrition with the students, the parents and the teachers, the farmer groups, and the work with the district administration to continue this program after our program ends. And this program ends in September of 2020. Our big program is the school feeding program out in Mara, 231 schools. We've been out there since 2010. A lot of work in these schools, a lot of work in these 3 districts, a lot of amazing learning about school feeding in Tanzania. So it's not just a school feeding program, it's a school feeding plus plus. So we do work in the education sector in the schools, the agriculture component, the school feeding, water and sanitation, health and nutrition, women's empowerment with women's groups in the communities, and early childhood development. So each one of these is like a project. It's significant work in 231 schools in these 7 distinct programming sectors. So it's like projects within a program. And I'll share a little bit about the different sectors. Of course, the main objective of the program is to improve literacy. So improve the literacy of students. So a lot of our work goes into previously to this year to training teachers. We've introduced and support libraries in all 231 schools, library groups, literacy clubs. A lot of the work in this component is focused on improving the capacity and the performance of literacy of the students in school. Agriculture is a huge component of our program. So we work, almost all the schools now have a school garden that grows vegetables and fruits and some root crops. We're promoting orange flesh sweet potatoes because they're nutritious. The orange flesh of the sweet potato is fantastic. It's new, and our program has been very successful in not just introducing it in the schools, but it's expanding and multiplying in the communities now. It's more drought resistant and very nutritious. You can eat the root and you can eat the green. We also this year implemented a smartphone application to help track fall armyworm. If you haven't followed the evolution of fall armyworm in Africa, it's a huge destructive pest. It came from the Americas. And Tanzania received it like 3 years ago. It's that new. And PCI is on the cutting edge of using technology to track and treat and lessen the negative impact of fall armyworm. In our area last year, fall armyworm ate approximately 30% of the total harvest. 30% of the total harvest of communities who are already resource constrained. This is a huge contribution by PCI and has been a success, and we're expanding it again this year. We're expanding the area that is used this year.
Can you give us a brief idea what it actually does?
Yeah.
And how you eradicate it.
So it's the worm?
No, sorry, no, the technology.
The technology. So it's two ways. The first way is a source of information. So it helps farmers identify fall armyworm, has the larvae, pictures of the larva, pictures of the moth, allows you to identify it, track it, record it, measure your field. So it has a GPS. Most farmers have never measured their field. So you can get an estimated infestation rate. And then it has recommendations on treatment. All that information then goes into our database, which goes to the district and regional officials who can, with that data, make informed responses to fall armyworm. This is something the government of Tanzania is hugely concerned about. It's a national challenge for Tanzania, fall armyworm. And this is a big potential contribution to Tanzania's fight against fall armyworm. Big contributions we've made is building latrines and water systems in schools. Most of these schools in the rural areas do not have a water source. And if you've been to some of these schools, the latrines are dismal at best. And PCI's contributions have elevated the infrastructure for latrines and put in a lot of different water sources. So we put in rainwater harvesting tanks. We're putting in boreholes. We've had stream diversions. It's a big concern if a school with 1,000 children doesn't have a water source. So PCI's been a leader in infrastructure for primary schools, water and sanitation in Tanzania. Health and nutrition sector, we've done a lot of work in promoting nutrition, especially combining the schools with the gardens and helping children and parents understand what not just a nutrition diet is, but a nutritious garden. It all starts with what you plant in your garden, what ends up in the kitchen. We also have hand washing stations in each school, health clubs, and we have a big emphasis in all of our latrines to have a special place for the young woman's menstrual hygiene management. So the clubs help stock the supplies, the government provides supplies. So that's one of the reasons adolescent girls stay home from school too much. So we've made a bit more of a push to ensure that those supplies are at the schools. Women's empowerment, these are groups of women and men, but primarily women, who come together on a weekly basis and save money together. So they give a little money and then they loan it out. It's life-changing for most of these members. So if we were all in a group, we would save money, and then the next month we'd give it to Janine, who would use it, make money and pay us back, and then we'd share it with Peg. And it's just an incredible access to capital, which most rural people in Tanzania don't have. So we have about 10,000 members in the groups formed in our current program. And what we're doing now is taking them from groups of about 20 and forming networks so that they can be recognized by the government and have access to outside financial institutions. So it's making them more credible. So our strategy this year is to elevate our groups into networks so they can be more like associations and more recognized. So we do different skill building in these groups. We have the basic business skills, teaching these savers how to do business, profit and loss statements, simple things like that. We also have another application that allows groups to do their banking on their phone. So taking it off the paper and pencil ledger is saved in the box and putting it on the smartphone. Incredible innovation. So you've heard about 3 smartphone applications that PCI is using in Tanzania. I don't know any other NGOs in Tanzania that has 3. We're very unique in having the opportunity to do programming with 3 different technologies. And the last one is a skills training, where just different life skills, problem solving, communication, time management, different life skills that we can all benefit from. So our groups go through not just financial savings and lending, but it's a life building skills. It's different tools, different strategies to improve your life. And it changes lives in a very short period of time. These women's empowerment groups are extremely powerful. So we had a small program with Women's Empowerment up in Arusha, where the AfriScout program is. Very successful program. We wrapped that up at the end of last year. So we showed that our approach in Tanzania to these groups can be applicable in different cultures and different areas of Tanzania. Another one of our programs within the school feeding program is early childhood development. Again, this is a different early childhood development program, a different approach. Again, pre-primary children, so 2 to 5 years old. And we have a unique approach to it. This is a PCI, it was a pilot, now it's our own innovation. So we formed 80 of these groups last year, and this year we'll develop 80 more. And what we'll do differently this year, new slide. What we'll do differently this year is we're going to do a rigorous evaluation of these new 80 groups. And we've hired an outside firm to do the evaluation for us because we want to inform policy with it. We want to show the government of Tanzania this is one viable way to help improve the early childhood development of your population. So another way that PCI is taking its implementation up to the national policy level. And for an international NGO, that's the sweet spot. That's where it's so unique to be implementing work on the ground at the same time using that work to influence policy. And PCI has that opportunity now in Tanzania. So for the school feeding in these 231 schools for the last 9 years, we've fed about 10,000 metric tons of food. And as we'll see on another slide, that's about 94 million meals that PCI has provided to primary students. Very powerful. So we're moving from just providing the food to more community contributions. There's a village champion for each school to mobilize the community, different approaches in the schools to increase the parents and the community's engagement in the school. There's a bit of a distance in some of the areas of Tanzania, the communities and the school. And what we're trying to do is to, again, change behavior. All these programs are about changing behavior. And what we're trying to do is bring about approaches so that the communities are more engaged and more supportive of their schools and their students. So this year we've had a change in our program. We used to import food to Tanzania to distribute to the children. Keep in mind, we're funded by the United States Department of Agriculture. The United States Department of Agriculture purchases food in America and ships it overseas for emergency relief or development programs. Summertime 2019, the government of Tanzania said, please, no more food importations. We're good. We're food secure. No more food importations. So we've had to shift. So we can't bring in the food anymore. And our donor, because of its regulations, won't allow us, instead of bringing it in, to buy it locally. So we're going to grow it. We're going to invest a lot more in local production, in the school farms and the school gardens and community groups. So we're setting up loosely like contract farming. So we're setting up community groups, investing in them, and their harvest has to be shared with the school.
Norm,
School meals.
your dog, somebody needs to clean it up.
Oh, geez.
Can I ask a question? I must have misunderstood. I thought you said the government said you don't need to bring any more food in.
Yeah,
They did say that.
yeah.
If they didn't need to bring it in, then why are we doing a program that we're growing it now? I got a loss between A and B. If they didn't need it, why are we growing it?
I think there's, in most places, there's a disconnect between policy and the people. So, and the government of Tanzania changed significantly in 2015. And very nationalist government.
I'm sorry.
Can you just open it up?
He's gonna come over here.
It's not you.
Maybe he needs to go outside again.
Don't let him go. Don't let him out.
He wants to take them out.
Oh, anyway.
Will it help open it
I don't have to have it made. Carpet cleaned.
Sorry.
No problem.
Okay. So Larry's question, where did Larry go?
He went down the hall.
To get fresh air.
So it sounds like, I mean, there's a political decision by the government that really wasn't based on reality, it sounds like.
The government in Tanzania said that they were food security.
Right.
And the government in Tanzania, this new administration is not that friendly with the United States and European donors. So they've completely changed that relationship. So they don't have that much excitement about importing American food. So they said, don't bring it in, buy it.
Yeah.
Buy it locally.
Yeah.
We have to. And our donors said, oh, our regulations are kind of set up to buy from American farmers, not from Tanzanian farmers. So no, you can't buy locally. So what they allowed us to do, though, is to grow it locally. So instead of stopping the program, which other donors could have done, they said, okay, can you work with the local communities and local schools, local groups to grow the food? So that's our new strategy.
Mm-hmm.
Excellent.
Very good.
So just a quick overview of our data system to keep track of all this. We have about 75 indicators we have to report to our donor. We have different information we're collecting. We're almost all now 100% digital from source up through our reporting. So we've started using maps, we use dashboards. We have different data management systems that allows us to receive data on a quarterly basis. So we're getting real-time data now to make programming decisions. So just some numbers, and this is from 2019. We've provided 15 million meals this year. About 3,000 farmers have been trained in improved agricultural practices. About 2,500 people have been trained in school feeding. So there's a lot of information sharing, a lot of capacity building. 10,000 participants in our WE groups, and all of our schools have libraries, either a reading corner or a purpose-built structure for a library. So this is getting to the question earlier about strategy, because I think this is a really powerful part of what PCI does now is we're working with ministries, national ministries, to inform policies. The school feeding policy, we are at the table helping construct that policy. And we work now in 231 schools with 200,000 people, 200,000 students, but there are 8 million students in Tanzania. So our program is being used to directly inform future policy in school feeding. So yes, we're working in 231 schools, but our contribution is going to last for years and years with millions of students. And the same with the health guide and the early childhood development guide. This puts us at the national discussion to influence policy. So that makes you a good partner with the government. And if you're a good partner with the government and there's future programming in that area, we're at the front of the queue as far as future programming. So this for me is, not all NGOs have this opportunity to implement and advocate for policy at the same time.
Oh, the increase in scale is huge then. Impact. Yeah.
Our impact grows substantially when you work at
As well as
policy level.
sustainability if the government adopts it. the
Yes.
approach.
Yes.
So what would you say is key to being able to do that?
Relationships with the government are absolutely critical. We also have 8 years of significant school feeding experience in Mara. And I don't know any other international organization that has 8 years of that much experience in school feeding. We're the experts. We know it better through and through than any other organization. And we have a good relationship with the Ministry of Education. And it's absolutely critical right now that we do have a good relationship with the government of Tanzania, because they have taken control of the government sector, the corporate sector, and the nonprofit sector. So the environment in Tanzania has changed significantly the last 5 years.
Mick, I'm wondering if you think that our size not being so large and so well-known globally as some of the big organizations actually helps us in that regard, because we're not seen as this big gorilla in the China shop. We tend to reach out more to government because we need to collaborate and partner.
Yes.
Do you think that plays a role?
It does play a role.
That's a good point.
It helps that we don't have the same profile in Tanzania as other international NGOs, and it helps that we're not funded by USAID. Even though we get confused with the two, we're not funded by USAID because they've had significant challenges with the government.
So explain more about that change in the government over the last 5 years.
Okay, so our government in the United States has changed significantly since 2016.
Yeah.
The government in Tanzania has changed more. It's just like turn it upside down. So Tanzania used to be the darling of the international community. Foreign investment was flooding in, and in 2015 it turned on its head. So he's very much a nationalist, the president, Magufuli, very much a nationalist, doesn't look far beyond East Africa to solve his problems, doesn't appreciate foreign aid at all.
Wow, very challenging.
Yeah.
He doesn't enjoy journalists, doesn't enjoy human rights, doesn't enjoy freedom of speech. Political opposition has been silenced. His party, the ruling party, won 99.9% of the races in the elections in October.
And it was legitimate?
Wow.
99.9%. They didn't register the opposition.
Impossible.
So
They just didn't register.
Yeah, it's impossible to have that kind of outcome.
it's easy to count if
That's
the
all right.
opposition is. They didn't even count some places because there was no opposition.
So what is the government of Tanzania most interested in terms of PCI programs?
Policy, they look to us more and more. Recently, we've been asked to help with the fall armyworm guideline. So different guidelines keep coming up in our discussions. The senior government representatives always talk about infrastructure. Stop training us, stop building our capacity, stop with all this soft stuff. Build something. Build us a road or a classroom or a health center or build.
But doesn't that invite China to step in?
China's there.
Okay.
China's there.
Because they're doing all that
That's exactly
infrastructure
what
stuff.
But, I mean, they want us
Poorly, but they do it.
do something tangible.
Right.
Government keeps telling us, do something tangible, something that we can see. It's just a different mindset. So we just go through this education that even with infrastructure, there has to be skills building and capacity building along with it.
So where does that leave you then going forward then, Nick, as far as the opportunity for additional programs?
with the government of Tanzania?
We're good. We're good. We have great relations. We work closely with 6 different ministries, not so much with finance, but the other 6, we have great relationships with these 6 ministries.
No, I guess maybe what I meant was where's the opportunity for PCI going forward here? I mean, you have a good relationship and that's all foundational and that's fantastic. But what does that really translate?
The growth strategy.
Yeah.
You know, in this business, you got to line up the stars. You know, the government has to be on board. There has to be a need. There has to be a good implementing organization, and there needs to be some money. So you need to get those things lined up for that opportunity. So what we've lined up are the relationships with the government. And I think that the 3 policies that we're working on are significant opportunities in the next phase. Because those guidelines need to be rolled out. We're just talking about developing the policy and guideline. But then to roll it out to every primary school in the country is a huge undertaking. And the government will need help to do that.
Okay.
So we may be in the technical assistance.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely.
And EFRA I mean, that is huge shock to the system, 30% of the harvest.
Yeah. Massive.
And it's in other West African countries?
Yeah, it's all over now. It's in Malawi, it's in Kenya, it's in Uganda. It's come from Americas to West Africa and across to East and Southern Africa.
You didn't bring it from Ecuador, did you?
They think it came from like South the United States.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Not Ohio.
No, we're not in the South.
Fool me.
It's in the ground.
No, it eats the.
It's a worm that gets in the ground and eats the crop.
It feeds on corn, rice, the grasses.
Mhm.
So it'll eat everything, but it prefers the sweet grasses. So the United States farmers can deal with it. We have a pretty good agrochemical.
At what stage do they deal with it? I mean, there's a worm, there's a larva, there's a fly, there's a worm.
Early. Yeah, as soon as it starts eating it, you got to get on it.
Spray.
Yeah.
So what's
They're a biological. If you get it early, you can put ash on it, put sand on it. There are different non-chemical approaches to it. That if you get it early and if you do it by the book, you can knock it out. But generally, it's a chemical approach, which has cost implications, has its environmental implications, but mostly cost is prohibitive in Tanzania. So in 2019, we tried to raise the visibility of PCI in Tanzania. So we published some success stories. We had different events. We had a great event when Carrie was in Dar and Jenny when they were in Dar in October. Had a great event to talk about our 3 applications, technology and development. We've been in national technical working groups. We sent a couple representatives to the Global School Feeding Conference. And we've had the U.S. government leadership out twice last year. We had the U.S. ambassador visit, and then we had the USAID mission director visit. And those are 2 significant visits for us. So the idea is just keep promoting PCI within Tanzania so that more donors, more investors recognize our good work, which should lead to more business in the future. So about 1.5 years ago, we started packaging some of our winning programming strategies. And this is what we call our stars. So our work plan to implement these is just pages long, just so many activities. You can get lost in the details. So what we try to do in each of the sectors is to pull one of them out so that we could focus on, we could document, and we could position it for future replication, future programming, future advocacy on policies. So let's just skip to the 3rd slide. So what we want to do is take our great programming opportunities and really focus on them and get them tweaked and get them ready for replication. So what's that mean? We need to make sure there's the proper evidence that shows it's successful. We have to document all the standard operating procedures, all the standards, all the activities that are necessary, all the roles and responsibilities. Imagine implementing a school feeding program in 100 schools in your district. That's the district people, the ward level people, the village people, the school people, roles and responsibilities and tools and procedures for all of that. And that's what we're doing with these stars, is this year we're documenting how to do it. Like step by step, roles and responsibilities and tools, so that every school in Tanzania can have a primary garden like ours. Because we have the best gardens in Tanzania. So these 8 stars, we also are preparing for future replication, new programming, possibly being part of other projects. So we consider these are 8 potential growth opportunities for PCI in Tanzania. And finally, my priorities for 2020 are the stars. I consider these part of my future. So I spend a lot of time focusing on this. Chikuya Chetu is the last year. We're bringing in a human resource information system this year. Continue with the visibility in 2020 because that's so important for an international NGO. Continue with the 3 smartphone applications in our programming. Those 3 guidelines are significant activities for this coming year. We will register a local organization in Tanzania this year because there are more and more opportunities coming out for a local organization. And in Tanzania, it would be good to have options, the international side as well as the local side. Part of my objective being in San Diego this week is to continue working on our growth plan. That's where's the new work going to come? You know, we've got a good bit of business right now, but in addition to that, what should we be doing to generate more programming, more interest, more partnerships? And finally, because the government has gone to Dodoma, we will establish our presence in Dodoma this year. So we've assigned 1 person to go to Dodoma to be our first PCI representative in Dodoma. Because there's so much work that we're doing with the government, we need more representation in the capital. Thank you.
Thank you.
Why don't we give the folks on the phone a chance to ask questions first? Any questions for Nick out there?
Yeah, hi, it's Karen. I do have a question, Nick. Thank you for such an informative presentation. It really it's just mind-blowing what you are doing and just how many firsts or how impactful PCI is there as a result of your work. And I guess I'm still stuck on, I'm just not quite sure how we overcome this, the ability to really execute and continue the kind of work, extraordinary work that we're doing in light of government practices and policies. Can you just talk a little bit more about that? I mean, on one hand, they seem so adverse to funding and US-based funding, yet on the other hand, and want to see just more hard infrastructure. On the other hand, what we're doing seems so significant and so impactful to the entire school community, as well as all the work that we're doing with the mobile apps and women. Can you just talk a little bit about how we bridge that gap?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And I think it's good to keep in mind the different levels of the government. So we look at all the levels, from national, region, district, village, school levels. And they all have different perspectives and different ideas of what partnership means. So we have great relationships through the regional level, and in the national ministries, great relationships up to like the permanent secretary level. So not the political appointees. Everybody respects our programs and likes PCI, likes other NGOs just fine. It's more the next level up. It's the political cadre, that changed in 2015 that has brought in a different approach and a different way of dealing with international organizations. The US government investments in Tanzania have gone down, but not significantly. And I don't think it's a response to this government. There's discussions about reducing the investments, but I think there's been several reductions, but similar to other USAID missions across East and Southern Africa. So we haven't seen investments go down, but the relationships right now are significantly strained between the Europeans and the Tanzanians, the Americans and the Tanzanians. What that will do to future aid is still uncertain. But the human rights abuses, the journalists, the opposition, you know, the Europeans and the Americans have voiced criticism against that, and that just doesn't go over very well in Tanzania now. It's very much a regime in control. And what we try to do is we're a non-political organization, you know, so we try not on either side. Keep in mind, we're funded by the US government and we work with the government of Tanzania. So it doesn't help us to voice opinions about governments. We just have to work with what we have. And we didn't choose to stop importing food. And we didn't choose not to be allowed to purchase the food. Those are choices beyond our control. So, you know, PCI isn't a great opportunity in Tanzania because we're not recognized as one of those organizations working on civil society or freedom of journalism or reproductive health. We're not part of that, so we're not seen in that light with the government of Tanzania. But the rigor that we have to report to the government of Tanzania has changed dramatically. We have to submit quarterly reports, we have to submit audited financial statements. It's changed significantly. And some NGOs are under more stress than we are. We're not under any stress. We just have to follow new rules. But other NGOs are being visited by the government and by the tax authority.
You didn't knock on wood that time.
Knock on wood. Yeah. Everybody should.
Thank you, Nick. Great. Thank you so much.
And this nationalistic and populist trend is not, I mean, it's in multiple countries.
Right.
And yeah, it's really Europe.
Yeah, it's hard for me to criticize any government.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You know, just because you never know what government will come next.
Any other questions from the field?
Okay. Looks like JP.
Yeah, hi, John Potter here. Yeah, very happy to hear this presentation. Very exciting and quite, I think, clear and expansive. You talked about and celebrated 3 apps. What's the mobile phone penetration rate like? And are there constraints to being able to scale up the use of that type of technology in countries?
Very good question. There's a lot of mobile phone, smartphone use in the urban centers. Less and less in the rural areas. In the rural areas, most everybody has a cell phone, but it's the old Nokia sort of cell phone. So like in the area with AfriScout, there's a few smartphones out there. But one of the challenges there is the connectivity is 2G. Well, the app needs, it's not all 2G, but there are areas of 2G. The app needs 3G. So you have, a user would have to go around. Those areas won't remain 2G very long. You know, it keeps changing. Where I think the United States is going to 5G, Kenya's going to 4G, and Tanzania is going to 3G. You know, so it's coming. And for all of our applications, we're at the cusp of smartphone usage in Tanzania. So it's not prevalent. Like I would imagine we've got 100% smartphone users in this office or close to it. In Tanzania, we wouldn't be, in rural Tanzania would probably maybe 5–10% smartphone usage. What's it going to be in 5 years? Significantly more. Smartphones are going down in price in East Africa. They're like $60 now, $70. You can buy a smartphone to run basic apps. So technology is getting cheaper. Interconnectivity is getting better. So there are challenges with this. Like in our Dream Save, the Village Savings and Loan app, they're not literate yet on smartphone usage, urban groups. And they're not sure if that app is going to do the same thing as the paper and pencil. But the second go around, they'll be sure. So we're just at the we didn't want to do banking on our smartphones at the beginning, and now many of us do banking. So it's changing. The technology in East Africa is changing probably more quickly than the technology in the US, just because the leaps are bigger. But we're a little early as far as smartphone penetration in Tanzania. But Kenya has a lot more than Tanzania.
Great,
What
thank
do
you.
you see the potential for AfriFarm, scaling up the application AfriFarm? Clearly, there are a lot of other parts of Africa that could use it.
But PCI piloted it in Malawi and Tanzania last year, and it worked in both places. In Tanzania, we're working with the government for future scale up. So we're taking it from 3 districts this year to 8 districts, the whole region. The national ministry is interested in all of their extension officers using it. Not just because it provides good information to the farmers and to the extension officers, but it gives the ministry real-time data. And that's very important fighting something like this. There's also potential commercial usage. There's a lot of big farms. Seed companies, Corteva, we've been in talks with Corteva about using it on their farms, their outgrowers. So there's a lot of interest to expand the usage of it. And what we want to do is just keep growing the usage and keeping, maintaining the data systems to track it too.
Is there potential to make it a social enterprise if that's a fee-based system that makes it self-sustaining?
Possibly. Depends on, if it's for government use, then it would just be government. It would be a government tool. They would just buy it for their extension officers. Private company would use it, for themselves. I don't know. I don't think Tanzania is yet at the point where an individual farmer would pay for it. It's just technology isn't used in that way yet.
It's terrific that the government's interested in using it for all their extension agents.
Yeah, there's great opportunities. It's a fantastic innovation. Yeah.
Do we have any proprietary position in this? PCI.
PCI and Damagi, which is a data company out of Boston and Cape Town, co-design.
We own it.
Do we own it? Good, that's all I want. There was another question from remote. I think John, maybe? You're on mute.
Oh, it's unmuted for that.
Maybe not. I thought somebody started to talk.
Okay. Yep. No.
Okay.
Norm has a question.
From what we've seen here, the programs in Tanzania are very purposeful and are a wide variety of programs. I'm interested in, I'm informed by back in the 60s when USAID would say, well, these people need a well, so we'll build them a school, and vice versa. How well are our funders in looking, how well do they do in looking at what's really needed and giving you the flexibility to do what you need to do? And also, how many funders do you have to have all those various programs?
Very good question, thank you. So we have four donors now. The Belgians fund AfriScout. Two foundations, ECF and Hilton, fund Effects, and then the United States Department of Agriculture funds the school feeding program.
Women Empowered has other funding though,
Thank
as
you.
well. Yeah.
Women's Empower has a private donor who funds their activity. Every donor has different constraints and different regulations and different mandates and missions. I think donors, I've been in this business for 25 years, and I think the donors are pretty well informed on what the needs are. Just like I think the government of Tanzania is very informed on what their needs are.
At the bureaucratic level, not at the political level.
But the politics gets in the way.
Yeah.
You know, with foundations, with private donors, with governments, you know, that the policy sometimes doesn't align with the needs. But I think now, these days, most donors are very well aware of the needs, and their programs have to address them. Donors are very impatient with underperforming programs now. They'll pull it immediately. I've seen big programs, small programs all over the world, and donors have no patience for limits, none. They come out, they monitor, they pay attention. The standards, the rigor has definitely improved in this business.
But our donors are fairly flexible, I would think. I mean, I think ECF has been flexible. USDA showed flexibility when they came up against this no importation issue and gave us cash instead.
The USDA is very flexible.
Yeah.
That's very, very gratifying to hear.
Mm-hmm.
It really is.
And different government agencies are flexible in different ways and with different instruments.
Yeah.
USDA is much more flexible than USAID. And a USAID cooperative agreement is much more flexible than a contract. So there's different mechanisms within these agencies and different flexibility within the different agencies.
I have a question on the implementation. The early childhood development program that you started off with, the 2x2 design, is that a data sharing? You mentioned one or two universities that are actually crunching the data. You get statistical help. Are we part of that, or are we just turning it over?
Oh no, we're part of it.
Okay. You guys are going to be authors when it's published.
Well, I don't know about me, but I'm sure he will.
Okay.
Lauren will be.
Lauren should be, yeah.
Lauren and our Tanzanian program manager.
He's in DC right now, or Vermont.
As a country director, that's one thing you don't have. You don't have so many authorships because
After 25 years, you don't care anymore.
just have the joy to be involved in each of the different programming sectors.
Yeah.
Is fantastic.
Right, yeah, no, I
for me.
understand.
Yeah.
But this is really data rich.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this is nice.
Yeah, we spend a lot of time with data.
Yeah.
And a lot of time improving our systems and getting quality data now.
Are you entering remotely, electronically, or using paper?
Tablets and phones.
Tablets and phones.
We've almost done 100% away with paper.
You know, I wonder if we have a few minutes. I think that the folks here might be very interested in hearing about the internal leadership development program that you developed and implemented over the last year.
Good, thank you. Before coming to PCI, I worked for another NGO in Chapel Hill, and I had the pleasure of working with 2 adult learning specialists to design an active learning approach to leadership development. So I was kind of in Jenny's job before, based in headquarters, working with 2 countries. But three of us designed this approach. And I brought in the field perspective and they brought in the technical, how do people learn perspective, which we should all know more about that. So we designed this leadership program and I implemented it for 5 years, but never with the team that I directly supervised. So in Tanzania, when I first arrived, our HR manager, Maya, said, oh, by the way, we're looking to do a leadership program here, and we have these bids from different firms. So we looked through them, and I said, well, by the way, I have this approach over here, which you can look at, but you know, it's up to us to decide what we want. So anyway, we went ahead and did it in the structure that I had brought in, and we adapted it, and we had the 15 senior leaders in PCI Tanzania go through this 10-month program. And it started with a 360 assessment, which most of our people had not been through before. And then they all developed an individual development plan. So for those 10 months, what would they do within their chosen leadership competencies? So that was one strand. The other strand was each of the 15 leaders were assigned a coach in this office mostly, some in DC. I think we have 3 coaches here. Thank you very much. So the coaches met with the leaders at least once a month, were part of their growth in the year. And usually, and I think most times even this year, incredible relationships developed because we had these Tanzanian leaders going through this leadership program. So their mind is opened up to all these new ideas and thoughts. And then they have an opportunity to partner with a very senior, successful professional in their industry. And that's an incredibly powerful opportunity. The third part was we had courses every month. So we chose 9 different competencies, leadership competencies: self-leadership, communication, team leadership, strategic leadership, decision-making, accountability, delegation. But it wasn't so much about the reading or the podcast. And there's a little bit about that, but each month they would have to do an assignment. So it's active learning. So that they would all have to apply that theory to their job. And then at the end of the month, they would come back and have to make a presentation to everybody in a webinar. So I would facilitate a 2-hour webinar where I didn't say much, but just let them share what their experience was on that topic that month. And it costs very little to do. It's just time. We came together 1 week out of the year at the very beginning, and we didn't meet again for the whole year except virtually. And it's incredibly powerful. My team has changed dramatically, as have I. I learned so much about these leaders, about who they are, about how they've grown and what they've learned, and the sharing that happens. But the communication now that happens between these leaders, they're all saying the same thing.
It's a shared language.
It's a shared language. It's a shared understanding. They're talking about time management, which isn't an East African cultural tradition. They're talking about effective meetings. They're talking about does that team have a terms of reference? So there's a lot of soft benefits that have gone along with the program. And we're hoping to replicate it again this year.
And we'd like to figure out a way to support replication beyond Tanzania as well. I mean,
have we tried it anywhere else?
We have not. And the approach, the design of the program that Nick did at his previous organization is just, exactly the way you approach leadership development, which is essentially you learn it, you apply it, you teach it to your other team, and you build it into the work that you do. And the person that I was coaching, have been coaching, it just feels like it was life-changing. Which we, that's a big statement, right? But I think just like the work we do with our communities, I think investing in our people can have some pretty significant ripple effects within communities.
It's another sustainability and scale strategy.
Yeah.
I was speaking with my leader the other day because we still have conversations, and she said to me that at the beginning of the program, she was very skeptical, and she said that in her mind and in most Tanzanians' minds, leadership is not something you can learn. You can't be trained on leadership, right? Leadership happens when you're older and when you've had a lot of experience, and it's kind of like one day it happens and you can't learn. This is what she said to me. And that through the program, she realized you can actually gain these skills. And then when she tried it, applied it with her team, that she saw the change in the response and the feedback she was getting. And truly, it has been very life-changing. And, we take for granted that we have, shelves and shelves and shelves of leadership books at our fingertips. And for many of our staff in the countries where we work, it's a luxury that they don't have. And they pour themselves out into the work that we do every day, but investing back in their own development, I think not only, makes our program stronger, but it builds the capacity of people who are from that country, who are the future of that country. And so it's really remarkable, and Nick has done a great job.
A lot of pride and happiness on the part of the.
But I would say, you said it doesn't cost much, but Nick, you spent a great deal of time on it. And wasn't it once a month that you had a call with all the coaches and would go over both the content, get feedback from the previous month and how our leaders were doing, but also went over the content for the next month's training, and very, very, just beautifully done. Really professionally.
Yeah, that's the part that's, to me, strikes me as different. So kudos to you for holding others accountable, to actually add yourself accountable to follow up on that each and every month for that period. I believe that's the whole key to why that's so successful. Good job.
Yeah, it's really been terrific.
And what's interesting about this program is it's not based on the professor approach. It's more applied learning and then reflection and sharing. And that changes people. And, I don't know how many lectures I've sat through and didn't remember it. But if you go and do it, it makes a difference.
Yeah.
And what this program focuses on is it's not the employee, but it's the person. So we start with self-leadership. We talk about time management. We all set, and I go through this every year too, we all set annual goals that we track during the course of the program. So like one of our people wanted to run a marathon this year, was one of her goals for last year. She did it, and then people wanted to lose weight, people wanted to get fitter, so people wanted, one woman wanted to write a book, she wrote a book, other people wanted to read 10 books. So it also provided people with access to different ways of organizing themselves. We take it for granted, all these things, but many Tanzanians have never set annual goals before. And even though we may have set annual goals, 9% of New Year's resolutions live beyond January. So what this program did was allow us to set goals, but then provide a community to support each other. So we could give encouragement when we weren't on track, but then celebrate when somebody was successful. And it's fantastic.
So by the way, we do have hopes to replicate it because we've written it into our Botswana program as well as to a new Zambia proposal. So I think we're hoping to find a way to bottle this somehow and be able to replicate it somehow. So we have conversations this week about how to do that. But it's very, very exciting, very authentic change that you see in people, much more than they would get from sitting in a classroom for 3 days,
Great.
Kudos to you for that, Nick. Yes.
Thank you so much, Nick. Any final comments or questions? I think we're at time.
We are.
Anybody on the line want to say anything? Well, thank you so much, Rick. Rick, I said Rick.
Next.
I know who you are.
We've been talking now from the staff meeting here since 10, so.
Oh,
10:30.
Yeah.
Well, it's a pleasure. Thank you for this opportunity. It's great to meet you all, some of you again. But if you ever find yourself in East Africa, please come on.
All right.
You're most welcome.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So Jenny will do magic and we'll send the recording around. And so that more people can actually take advantage of this presentation, which is
Our
great.
turnout is increasing.
Oh, I would say, yes.
Thank you all for coming.
Work hard on that.
It's a fourfold increase in attendance for one of these, so you're the superstar.
That's right. You hold the record.
Tanzania stars, yes,
Start of the year.
yes.
Put the bar high.
And nope, you can just close down on your end. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, bye-bye.
I'm just mortified.
Oh, sure.
Never